Hello everyone, Ron again, and in this video, we're going to do more FL Studio project tips. So in the last video, I was talking about organization, stuff like that. So I was talking about color coding, I was talking about having things docked to the right, like my voices, and having buses, basically. So like, these three red ones only go to this red one over here. I was talking about using the playlist and having instrument tracks or audio tracks, how you can change them. I don't think I went over this though. You can change it from here. So let's say you want an audio track, you can choose like insert number 10. And then if I was to do that, whenever I put something here, it will play through that mixer track. It's good for when you have like sounds and you want to put the sounds across the actual playlist rather than to make patterns, and you want to just quantize the sounds as samples. It saves CPU also. I talked about middle clicking things because that's a good example. When you middle click, as in pressing down on the scroll wheel, it gives you the option to rename and to recolor, and that's a lot faster. It's a lot faster than having to select here and then choose like color and all of that. Let's see what else. One thing I wasn't able to talk about, which I will give more detail to in this video, was the fact that when you have this, the browser, if you decide that you're going to put something here and make an instrument track, then you can just drag it from here and separate it into, you have what's installed, generators and effects. Now, you can think of installed as what you have installed yourself and helped FL Studio to find, but also the stuff that naturally is there. So you got like Fruity Big Clock, Fruity Delay, Fruity Delay 3, 2, Fruity Reverb is going to be here somewhere. These are effects. So you got, these are the ones I installed, the VST and VST3. And these are third-party plugins. So these you see here are from Native Instruments, Absinthe, Byte, Choral, Dirt, Flare, Guitar Rig, Nectar 3 Elements, Nectar 3. Those are from iZotope. Neoverb is iZotope, so on. Then you got Abbey Road Chambers, that's from Waves.com. C6, CLA, those are from Waves. So if you wanted to find one of those, for example, just quickly, you could drag it from here and put it on a mixer track. But you can do the same thing with the instruments, which are called generators, as I said. In the last video, I could not figure out how to get this thing to come back. But if you click view, it's right here. So the reason it disappeared was because of that. This was unclicked. And apparently it doesn't want to unclick now. So my computer is defiant. But Alt F8. And then I have this set to auto hide, which is right here. If I wanted it to stay out, I could uncheck that. But I don't, because I like having screen real estate. So with that being said, what I did in the last video was click on something to make it so that it would become an instrument track. But if you had audio or a generator, you could just drag it. So the way I normally do it is like this. Drag it here. It instantly creates an instrument track. Then that shows up right here. And the advantage of that is, as we discussed, that when you change the name, it changes everywhere. So it's name here, and it's going to be name here. When you go to the channel rack, it's also called name. So it's unilateral changes, and the same thing applies to the color. So that was one of the things that I wanted to talk about. Now the next thing is going to be CPU usage. As you can see, the CPU meter up here. And from what I understand, there's something special about the way that it calculates. But I'm not going to get into that because I forgot exactly what it is versus how you would think of like regular CPU usage. It was something really strange. This is like ImageLine is very unique with the way they think about things, and the CPU meter is no exception. But I cannot explain it to you because I didn't fully understand it myself, and I only found one video that ever spoke about it. But if I watch that video again, then maybe I'll talk about it in the future. It was interesting. So basically, if you have this hit 100%, it's going to cause artifacts in the audio. And there is such a thing as a safe buffer overload so that the computer won't crash or whatever happens, like it'll freeze, I guess. And it will allow it to overload in such a way that it won't do that. But the place where you control those things is going to be in project general settings. So we go over these. This is where you have MIDI, right? So if you have a keyboard or some other MIDI device, you connect it here and then you enable it here. My keyboard is turned off, so it's not actually populating. Then you got audio. This is the first one. So buffer length is the amount of time, basically, when the computer, I think, when it's refreshing to check real time for how the audio is like happening. So let's say this is like 47 milliseconds, right? And the easiest way to understand this, the way I do, is when you have a shorter buffer time, the computer is more aware of changes at a faster pace. So if I have this buffer time, maximum you can have, it's going to take a longer time before the computer discerns that I made some type of external change. But the most obvious one is when you press a keyboard. And when there's a shorter time, the computer is checking more often. And that means that it is going to have to use more CPU for that purpose. Because it's like having to think over and over again. So you'll notice, if you look here, I don't know if this is going to do one of those buffer overloads I was talking about, but if you switch the buffer length to be a lot shorter, 56, and my battery is running low, that's funny. So if I close that, then this will start to be higher in CPU usage. If I go back to it, and I switch it back to a longer buffer time, you'll notice that it's not going to go higher quite as frequently. And to be honest with you, it's behaving now because it went way higher than that before. It went to like 50 and 60 and it stayed there. But that's one way if your project is overloading with CPU usage. Here, and it is in audio settings, and increase the buffer length, and then you should have more CPU power. The next way is when you go to project, time base, PPC. And I honestly forgot what this stands for, but I can explain it to you. Basically, when you zoom in, there is a certain amount that you can zoom in, and you can see the fidelity of a waveform. So I don't know, hold on. Let's go to packs, drums, kicks. It did not add it because that's an instrument track. So if I zoom in, I can see a certain amount of the waveform, but I can't see the full waveform. What PPC does is it increases the amount that you're able to zoom in and get more fidelity out of what you see. And the higher you go, the more it's going to be able to zoom. But look at how the CPU jumped. So you might consider that you don't need to zoom in this much. See how high it goes? If you reduce it, it warns you that there's no undo, but like that's fine. I've never heard a real significant change in that. It's just an amount of zoom that you're gonna see. But you can see how just when I was zooming out, it was skyrocketing in the usage of the CPU. So that's something to consider. The third way that comes to mind is you have tools and you have macros.